We've got to the point where we can roll the dice. Now we have these virtual dice that we can play Yahtzee with. But now we want to actually go the next step. We want to actually replace the whole scoreboard or the whole score sheet, right? And we want to add that score sheet to our dice frame. If we look at our user interface right now, let's take a look at it. We've got our buttons, we've got our roll buttons. We have this kind of temporary score button, but we don't have the rest of the score sheet. We can't choose the scoring category. Luckily, we're using a computer, so we don't actually have to do any math. We're going to rely on the computer to do all the math for us. When we hit a scoring category, it's going to check to see, hey, is this 3 of a kind? If it is, it's going to score it for us. If it's not, it's going to give us a 0. But how do we add those controls to our frame and make it look nice? Well, we have to think about the layout of the score sheet. Now, if I look at a Yahtzee score sheet, let me go see if I can find one. Here's a score sheet. We have a problem because the score sheet is kind of vertically oriented. It's in portrait mode, and of course our screen is kind of in landscape mode. Yahtzee score sheets have 2 parts to them. They have an upper section where you have an upper score, and then we have a lower score. We're not going to do these other columns because we're only going to play 1 game at a time, so we don't have to worry about these columns here. That's just to save paper, I guess. But our problem is our screen shape and our score sheet shape don't really match. So my suggestion is the score sheet is already cut in half, right? There's an upper score and a lower score. See, upper section and lower section. So what I'm saying is let's just cut it right here, and we'll put the upper section on the left side of the screen and the lower section on the right side of the screen. We'll still call it upper and lower for people who know how to play Yahtzee and have played it before. But for us, in our user interface, it's going to be the left side and the right side. The left side is going to be the upper scoring categories, and the right side is going to be the lower scoring categories. That's kind of what we're shooting for. So going back then, the sample then here, notice that the upper scoring categories are on the left side. We have buttons to indicate that we want to select that. I used to use checkboxes, but they're too small to click on. I find checkboxes annoying. We already have these J toggle buttons figured out. Why don't we use J toggle buttons to, once you select that scoring category, it's going to depress that button and hold it in. And then it's used, and then we won't be able to click on it anymore. So we're going to have to do some UI control to make it unclickable after you select it. We don't have to put a description on how to score it because the computer is going to know how to score it. So we can leave out the scoring predictions. Here, where it says add only aces, we could just say aces. The computer is going to figure out the score for us, right? So if we have 4 ones, it will put a 4 there. Same thing over here for 3 of a kind and 4 of a kind. In fact, this text here is all completely unnecessary. So all we really need is the buttons and the text box. The buttons and the text box. Now, apart from the buttons in the text box, we're also going to need subtotals and totals. Here's the grand total over here. This adds the upper score and the lower score together. Usually you don't do this until the end of the game. But since we have a smart computer, the computer can compute this after every turn. Every time you select a scoring category, it can update not only the grand total, but the lower total, the upper total, whether or not you've got the bonus, and then the total score before the bonus. See that? So these are all going to be calculated every turn. All right, so let's see how we're going to build this. The other thing we're going to add is a new game button down here in the corner. Perhaps not today, but in a future day. And I'll explain why it's way down there. Let's go back to our code then. What do we do here to actually create this user interface? I'm just going to grab the bottom here and pull it down. Notice it tries to think for us. I'm going to temporarily minimize this output box. Pull this down even more. It's trying to keep that roll button centered. That's not what we want. So we're going to select these two and move them back up to where they were. That seems okay. Now this UI generator has these really nice alignment tools. It's probably better if we maybe take the roll button and we center it based on this button here. That would make it look nice, I think. So this one looks like it's in the center of the screen, so just scooch it over a little bit. And then we're going to put a series of toggle buttons. So we go over to our swing controls here on the right, and if we look at our score sheet, we notice that we have 6 upper scoring categories, aces through 6s. So we're going to put 6 toggle buttons. So here's our first toggle button. We'll put here. I like toggle buttons that are a little bit bigger. Maybe make them as wide as that. Basically, we're looking for some symmetry, give it a professional look. And then you can just say, you can grab another one if you want, or if you don't want to keep resizing it, you can just select it and then say Control-C for copy, and then Control-V to paste. And then we can drag this. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. I'm going to grab this one. I'm trying. So just positioning this. Suppose that looks all right. And then continue to put them in our UI like that. I'm just continually hitting Control-V and grabbing it and using that spacing that it's suggesting, trying to keep the spacing consistent. And then maybe one more, because we need 6 of them, right? We see how we're a little bit off right here. Maybe we want it to line up with the bottom of the roll button. So I would select all of them then. Now the way you can make multiple selections is by holding down the Control key and then just clicking on the things that you want to select. And then you can move them as a group. Say we want them there. We'll need another set of roll buttons or toggle buttons for the lower scoring categories. We need to recall that we don't have just 6 scoring categories, we have 7. So it's a little bit off balance, right? We have 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, full house, there's Yahtzee, there's chance, there's small straight, there's large straight. So we have a few more buttons, but it might be nice to try to keep them the same size. So here I'm going to paste again, but this time I'll drag it over here, line it up with that button. There we go. Whoa, what happened there? Don't want that. And I'll just start copying this. So I Control-C on that one, and now Control-V, and just getting things to line up. So if we've run out of room, so I'm going to make this a bit longer. We also have to leave room for the totals and things like that. So each time I pull it down, it's trying to keep these things attached to this side, which is not what we want. Maybe if I did one column at a time. Yeah, I guess that's better. Okay, note that I only have 6 scoring categories here. I need 7. So I'll add one more. And again, yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine. I'm just trying to get the layout just right. Now remember, we have some totals that we need to include. We have to put in upper score total, the bonus, and then the upper score total plus bonus subtotal. So that'll all go right here. And then here would be the lower score total and then also the grand total need to go over in this area. So I'll see if I can squeeze those in there. Next is the text box where we put our score. Perhaps we'll line it up with the right side of this button there. Now what our text box is called in the swing controls, the one we want is called a text field. So I'm going to grab the first one and pull it out there. And it's good to line it up so that the text on the button lines up with the text in the text field. Okay? Now if you don't want to go in and I should have done this before on the toggle buttons, but if you don't want to go in and clear these text fields out, you can go here in the property window and just delete that. Boy, it got really skinny when I did, though. That seems a little bit much, but from a symmetry standpoint, maybe that's nice, so maybe I leave that. So we'll make it 80, it's the same width as the button up above it. And again, we can do the Control-C, Control-V trick, and that will keep the size the same. As we add each text field, notice how the name of it over here is getting incremented one at a time. We're going to have to go in and change those as well. So now we have our text fields. Visually we have this big blank area in the middle. We could use this for a graphic, maybe later it says Yahtzee on it or something. But right now we have this kind of blank space in the middle. Other things we need are the 3 subtotals, but I'll copy that and I'll put a couple more here and I'll just eyeball it. Maybe that's the upper score total. Here's the bonus. Oops. Bonus. And we'll keep these pretty tight. Maybe a little tighter. Because we need to put a button down here too. This will be the upper score total plus the bonus, so this is kind of a subtotal. Okay? So we'll just line those up. Over on the right side, we need to put in the lower score total. That was weird. And then the grand total. And that's too tight, of course. Okay. So kind of slop together, but we get the idea. What's missing? The new game button's missing. We'll get that later. But we need to put some kind of text describing what's in these fields, right? That would be a label. So we grab this label. And here we can actually put the text of the label. Here would be upper score. Okay. Yeah, so it's the upper score. And again, you want this text to line up with the text that's going to be in the text box. And this will be the bonus. So another label. We'll pull that down. And then I think it's a good idea to say when you get the bonus, so if greater than 63, so people know that you can get this bonus, this 35-point bonus, if the upper score is greater than 63. So I always add that. And then finally, another label. We'll call this total upper score. It's kind of a subtotal, but things moved again. See, as we add stuff, it's messing with our spacing up here. So it's trying to think for us, which is unfortunate. Yeah, so we're going to have to respace things, I guess. We also need labels over here on the right side for these fields. And so I'm going to grab a label here. And this will be the total lower score. And then finally, the last label. This will be the grand total. And our spacing is completely messed up. But at least we have our layout. Now these buttons, again, as we were putting stuff in, got resized. This isn't 80 by 80 anymore. Yeah, so I'm losing this battle. I think it's probably because the text in this these toggle buttons. Okay, so maybe just go in and we're going to change the text on the buttons, and maybe that'll help. Because it's trying to fit this text inside that button, and that might be causing problems. So let's change the label. Right now it's called JToggleButton6, and we just want it to say aces, okay? Because that's what it says on the form. This next one, this will be twos. I'm just going to the label here on the button. Threes. Now realize we're not changing the name of the button, we're changing the label on the button. We still have to go back in and rename the buttons. And that's really tedious, actually. All right. I think I've got it kind of close. This space is a little wide compared to the other ones, but I think it's because of this down here. So I'm going to shorten that a little bit because it seems to be causing lots of problems. Ah, that's better. Yeah, so that was the problem. Okay, I'm going to stick with that. It's not perfect, but gets the idea across. The other things to change here are the titles on these buttons here. First one is 3 of a kind. Next one, notice that doesn't fit. So make the button a little bit wider. And then at least everything's labeled. So that's the first step, is to get all the buttons on the screen and get the text on the buttons that needs to be there. You also want fields for the totals here. Now that we have the labels all done, we have to now also give meaningful names to each of the controls. Now control is a general term. It means something like a button or a text field or a label. If you look at this button, it's called JToggleButton6, which is not very descriptive of what it is. And so what we want to do is change its name. So let's find its name. And that might be under binding. Hello name. Code. Ah, there it is. Okay. So we'll leave the J toggle button, but we'll call it J toggle button aces. Okay. Oh, J toggle button twos. We want to show that it's a toggle button. So leave the word button in there. Makes for a long variable name, but this will make your code a lot more readable once you create click event handlers for each of these buttons. It'll actually use the name of the button, and then you'll be able to see which button is which. And then with these buttons over here, we'll also rename them. Using camel case. So just when you think you're done, as soon as we did that, notice our text fields got shrunk again. Something tiny. Frustrating. So let me pull this out then. See if that helps. Doesn't seem to. Ah, it actually did it for us. All right, as soon as you're done with that, then the last thing that you have to rename, you don't have to rename the labels because we're not going to change anything about the labels. We're not going to interact with the labels. We don't click on the labels. We don't change the text on the labels. I'm talking about these things, right? So we don't have to give them a name. We can just leave whatever name is on there. Okay, label 1, label 2, J label 1, I guess. But the ones we do have to change are these text fields. And just like with the buttons, we have to put in a meaningful name. So we'll call this upper score. If you think about it, you know, we have this upper score, we have the bonus, and then we have the upper score again, or the total upper score, but we had to get rid of total because it's messing up our spacing. The question we can ask ourselves is, do we really need that first upper score? Since it's doing the math for us, maybe we only need one upper score. Just because the score sheet has it on it, does it really mean that we need to put it on the score sheet here? I think to be consistent with the other videos, we're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to have to give the other one a unique name when we get to it. So this one's the bonus. And this one, let's call this one total upper score, even though we couldn't write that there. Now you probably noticed that I don't mind very long variable names. And the reason for that is because they're descriptive, and then you don't have to write in a bunch of comments describing what the variable name is or what the variable is for. Some people don't like names that long, some programmers, but I'd rather err on the side of being overly descriptive than the opposite of being way too terse and now you can't understand the code. Just be really consistent in your naming. and how you capitalize things. And then finally the grand total. We are leaving, if you look on the score sheet, there's the total upper score repeated on the lower score section. We're not doing that since we have that right there to our left. So we're leaving that one out. Okay, so all the fields our text fields are renamed, all the buttons are named. I think our UI now is complete. Let's see if anything changed in the game. Now I had mentioned perhaps earlier that it shouldn't have changed the way the dice work. All we did was add a bunch of controls. Boy, that's not good. Let's run the old one. I'm going to try, when you have a problem like this, when you run it and it doesn't show you what you want, a way to clean everything out and restart over, or restart the build process over again, is say clean and build project. Instead of just run, say clean and build, and it rebuilds everything, all the intermediate files, and now when I run it, I should get the whole UI. Yeah. And that actually looks pretty nice. Notice how the buttons here, they look pretty lame, but over here they look kind of nice. Eventually we'll take off this score button, and eventually we'll put a reset game button down here. From a UI perspective, I think that looks okay. If we roll, it shouldn't have changed the functionality of these roll buttons. Yahtzee. I get Yahtzee every time. And so what I would do is I would click on Yahtzee. Now what's going to happen in the real game is when I click on that, that's going to stay depressed. You're not going to be able to click it again, and it's going to put 50 points in there for us. And it's going to update all the totals for us, which is nice. And the roll button will be enabled. Okay, we don't have any of that functionality there yet, but that's what's going on. These text fields will also be read-only, so you won't be able to actually type into them. Other things that we'll make sure happens is numbers are typically write justified, so we'll write justified that in the text field. But again, we made a lot of progress today just building the user interface and getting our controls named and placed relatively nicely on the page. It still looks a little wonky, but you could spend days trying to get the UI generator to be exactly what you want. And I don't want you to waste your time doing that. All right, well, thanks for listening.